He thought it was just another stalled car on a back road, the kind of inconvenience life throws at people who don't have time to spare. But when he knelt in the dust beside her smoking engine and offered nothing but kindness, she saw something else. The next day she came back, with cameras, a question, and a truth that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his quiet life. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The road stretched in both directions like a held breath. No signs, no buildings, just the dull shimmer of heat warping the horizon. Her car, sleek, foreign, and far too proud for this kind of terrain, sat crooked on the shoulder, one back tire flat, steam hissing from under the hood. She slammed the door harder than she meant to, hands on her hips, sunglasses sliding down her nose as she tried to remember if there was even a single bar of signal. There wasn't. Of course there wasn't. The wind kicked up grit that bit at her calves. She hadn't dressed for this. Pencil skirt, low heels, blouse clinging to her from sweat and frustration. Her GPS had rerouted somewhere near the last gas station, now an hour behind her, and whatever shortcut it had found had led her here, middle of nowhere, alone and late. Always late. She popped the hood with a shaky breath, stepping back as steam rolled out like a warning. It smelled like burnt metal and a bad decision. She knew nothing about engines, just that this one had betrayed her at the worst possible time. She didn't hear the truck until it was almost beside her, low, old, the kind of truck that earned its dents instead of buying them. It rumbled to a stop on the gravel with a heavy sigh. The man who stepped out looked like he belonged to the landscape. Worn boots, sun-leathered skin, grease smudged down one forearm like a signature. He didn't speak right away, just glanced at her, then the car, then back again. "You all right?" he asked, voice low, quiet but not soft, like the kind of man who didn't say more than necessary. She nodded too fast. "Fine, it overheated, or something. I don't know." Her words tripped over each other. She hated how they sounded. He didn't comment, just walked to the front, leaned in under the hood. She half expected a scoff, a muttered judgment. Instead, he just said, "Radiator cap's loose." "You've got a leak. Fan's busted, too." She blinked. "Is it fixable?" He glanced at her sideways. "Anything's fixable. Just depends how far you're willing to go to keep it running." She looked at him then, really looked. Something about the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about the car. He wiped his hands on a rag pulled from his back pocket. "Name's Ben. I've got a shop about 10 miles back. I can tow you if you want." She hesitated. Pride prickled under her skin, but so did fear. 10 miles might as well be 100, with no signal, and a sun that looked ready to fall hard behind the hills. "Okay," she said finally. He nodded once. No smile, no charm. Just turned back to the truck already moving. She followed, dust curling around her heels, the dead car steaming behind them like a secret still deciding whether to be a warning or an omen. He didn't ask what had happened, didn't offer small talk or pleasantries, just parked the truck with the kind of instinct you don't second-guess, stepped out, and walked straight to her like he'd done this 100 times for strangers who didn't know how far gone they were until something forced them to stop. The gravel crunched under his boots. Dust kicked up in soft swirls around him. She stood off to the side, arms folded too tightly, watching him like she wasn't sure if he was about to help or judge her or both. Her phone was still clutched in one hand, screen dark and useless. He opened the back of his truck, pulled out a worn metal toolbox that creaked at the hinges when it opened. Tools rattled inside like old bones. He grabbed a wrench, a flashlight, and a rag that had seen more years than most people gave fabric credit for. "Pop the hood," he said. She did, half on instinct, half out of the sheer relief of someone else taking the lead. He leaned in, flashlight balanced in his mouth, sleeves pushed to the elbows. His hands moved like they belonged there, fast and sure, already diagnosing what she hadn't even known to be afraid of. Every now and then he muttered something under his breath, parts, fluid levels, timing. She didn't understand any of it, but the sound of his voice, low and steady, worked better than any reassurance she could have asked for. She shifted on her heels, unsure what to do with herself. "Do you need anything?" He didn't look up. "Nope." "No water? Payment? I can Venmo you." That made him pause. He pulled the flashlight from his mouth and stood, wiping his hands on the rag. "I'm not here to collect anything," he said. "Your car's overheated, fan's dead, radiator's bleeding out." She stared at him. "And you just stopped?" He met her eyes for the first time. His gaze wasn't soft. It was the kind that cuts through the noise and sees what's underneath. "You looked stranded, that's enough." Something in her twisted at that, not because of the kindness, because of how foreign it felt. In her world, help came with fine print, strings, expectations. Here, on the edge of nowhere, covered in sweat and humiliation, a man who hadn't even told her his last name was fixing her car like it didn't cost him anything to care. She blinked fast, swallowed hard. "Thank you." He didn't say "you're welcome," just turned back to the engine and kept working, like that was the only kind of thank you he knew how to answer. The sun was sinking fast, turning the sky the color of old blood, rust red fading to bruised purple. The heat had softened, but the air still clung like something unfinished. She sat on the edge of her driver's seat, door open, one heel kicked off, watching him work with the kind of attention you only give when you're too tired to pretend anymore. He didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate, confident. His hands worked the engine like he was coaxing an animal back to life, tapping, tightening, pausing to listen. She could hear the faint creak of his knees every time he knelt down, the clink of metal on metal, the sharp suck of breath when a bolt resisted more than it should have. "I can't believe you're just doing this," she said, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. It came out smaller than she meant. He didn't look at her, just reached deeper into the hood, adjusting something she couldn't name. "It's not broken beyond saving, just tired." She stared at the horizon. "Same." Something flickered in his expression then, but it passed so quickly she couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. He stood finally, wiped his hands on the rag again, and reached for the key she hadn't realized he'd taken from the dash. "Try it," he said. She did. The engine sputtered, twice, then turned over with a reluctant but steady hum. She exhaled. She hadn't even known. She was holding her breath. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it'll get you where you're going." She looked up at him. "And how much do I owe you?" He shook his head, stepping back. "You looked like you needed a break more than a receipt." That hit harder than she expected. No one had ever said that to her before, not like it mattered, not like they meant it. Her throat tightened. "You don't even know me," she said. "I don't have to," he replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "People don't end up stranded out here unless something else already gave out." She didn't know what to say. The sky behind him was darkening. The road stretched ahead, engine humming quietly now like a second chance. He just nodded toward the wheel. "Take it easy." And then he turned back toward his truck, boots crunching in the gravel, leaving her with a running engine, a quiet truth, and the kind of silence that lingers long after someone's gone. The truck was still idling when she pulled up beside him, window down, engine rattling with the kind of uneasy rhythm that said it had just barely forgiven her. "Let me give you a ride," she said. It came out more like a command than an offer. He glanced at the long stretch of gravel behind him, then at the fading sky. His own truck sat farther down the road, parked out of the way. "You sure?" "You fixed my car," she said. "It's the least I can do." He hesitated for just a beat, then opened the passenger door and climbed in. The cab smelled like old leather and expensive perfume fighting to cover the panic that had lived here an hour ago. They pulled back onto the road, gravel popping under the tires. The silence filled the space between them like fog. Heavy, thick with things neither of them had the words for yet. "You always fix strangers' cars in the middle of nowhere?" she asked, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Only the ones who look like they haven't slept in a week," he said. It wasn't a joke, but the corner of his mouth twitched, like it could have been. She didn't answer, just kept driving, knuckles pale on the wheel. Her hair stuck in strands to her temple, a trace of sweat still clinging to her collarbone. She looked like someone who had been unraveling slowly and didn't think anyone would notice. "Town's about 10 miles, he said, voice low. "Next gas station, hang left. Garage is 2 blocks down." She nodded. "And what then?" He looked out the window. Desert rolled past in shades of burnt gold and silence. "You go wherever you were headed." "What if I don't know where that is anymore?" He turned to her, not surprised. "Then, maybe it's time to stop driving like you do." That landed like a stone. Her hands tightened on the wheel. They didn't speak the rest of the way. When the town came into view, just a handful of lights and a water tower that leaned slightly with age, something loosened in her shoulders. Not relief, not yet. But the edge of whatever had been clenching her so tightly started to fray. He pointed toward a faded sign. Wilder's Garage. The letters were peeling. She pulled into the lot and cut the engine. "You sure you don't want anything for helping?" she asked, softer now. He opened the door, boots hitting pavement with a low thud. "I already got it." And just like that, he closed the door behind him and disappeared into the shadow of the shop. She sat there for a long moment, engine quiet, headlights off, listening to the sound of her own breathing. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel so loud. The gas station was little more than a shack with pumps, sun-bleached siding, a single flickering bulb above the door, and a vending machine that had long since stopped pretending to work. The kind of place Time didn't visit anymore. He leaned against the hood of her car, wiping his hands with the same rag he'd used all day. She stood by the pump, watching the numbers crawl too slowly on the rusted dial. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. It had taken on a different weight now. Like both of them knew they should be saying something, but neither one wanted to be the first to let the moment slip through their fingers. She capped the tank and turned, her hand brushing the dust off her skirt automatically. "Thanks again," she said, her voice steadier than it had been earlier. But her eyes kept drifting, to him, to the horizon, to anything that might offer her a reason to stay a second longer. He nodded once. "You should be good for another 100 miles, maybe more. Just don't push it too hard." She smiled, faint and tired. "Yeah, that advice works for more than the car." He let the corners of his mouth twitch up, just barely. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of diesel and sun-baked earth. The world around them was quiet, except for the soft clatter of a sign swinging in the breeze. "I'm Ben," he said suddenly. "Ben Wilder." She blinked, surprised he offered it, like she hadn't expected to matter past the engine and the drive. "Hallie," she said. "Hallie Lane." They shook hands, brief, dry. But it lingered just a second too long to be purely polite. Something passed between them then, something unspoken. Not romance, not recognition, just a flicker of knowing. Like two people who didn't realize the road they were both on had just turned in the same direction. "Safe travels, Hallie Lane," he said, stepping back toward his truck. "See you around, Ben Wilder," she replied before she could think better of it. He didn't correct her, didn't tell her that people didn't usually come back this way. Just looked at her like, maybe, just maybe, he hoped she would. The sun wasn't even over the rooftops when Ben pulled into the lot. Gravel crunched under his tires, the low rumble of his truck breaking the usual morning quiet. But something was off. He felt it before he saw it, like a wrong note hanging in the air. Then he saw the van. Sleek, white, spotless. Too clean for a town that still measured distance by how much dust clung to your boots. Logos on the side. Some boutique production company name he didn't recognize, stenciled in delicate artsy lettering. A few people milled around, too caffeinated for this early, unloading equipment like they owned the place. One of them set up a camera on a tripod near the edge of the lot. Another leaned against the side of the van, scrolling through a phone, bored and indifferent. Ben didn't get out right away. He sat in the cab, engine running, eyes narrowed behind the windshield. His garage, his space, was crawling with people who didn't know the rhythm of this town, didn't care to. And then she stepped out. Hallie. Same face, same eyes, but different now. Tighter, somehow. Hair pulled back in a quick, efficient twist, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in one hand. She wore the expression of someone who had come back not to ask permission but to set something in motion. He killed the engine, slammed the door harder than necessary, walked straight toward her. "What the hell is this?" he asked, low and sharp. She didn't flinch. "A story," she said. "Yours, ours, this town's." "You brought cameras," he said, glancing past her to the crew unpacking cords and light stands, without saying a word. "I didn't think you'd say yes if I asked." "You're right," he snapped, "because I wouldn't have." For a second neither of them spoke, just the hum of morning, the metallic clang of a case being dropped, the lazy whine of a fly circling. "I'm not here to exploit anything," she said, quieter now. "I saw something yesterday, something that mattered. People don't stop like you did, not anymore, and the world needs to see that." He looked at her then, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. "I fix cars, Hallie, that's it. I don't do spotlights." She nodded but didn't step back. "Maybe you don't, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve one." And for a long moment, neither of them moved. The camera behind her blinked red, waiting. He didn't follow her inside, not right away. Stood by the doorway of the garage, arms crossed, jaw set, watching the crew move around his space like it was just another backdrop, a lens to look through, a canvas to edit. The old workbench was already being lit by soft, diffused panels, like a church altar dressed for the camera. It made him sick in a way he couldn't name. Hallie turned from one of the producers and walked toward him, slow, like she knew she was already asking too much. "Ben," she said, voice calm but edged with nerves, not fear, something more careful. "Just let me explain." He didn't stop her, but he didn't soften either. "I'm a filmmaker," she began. "Documentary mostly. Human stories. I'm doing a series on small towns, places that still work because someone refuses to quit on them." He let that hang a second. "So you came back to make a movie out of me?" "I came back," she said, "because yesterday I saw something people don't see anymore. A man who stopped. A man who didn't ask for anything in return. A man who could have driven on, but didn't. That matters." He shook his head, laughing once, sharp, dry. "You got all that from changing a radiator?" "I got all that from watching how you looked at people, how you worked like it was more than a job, like it was the only thing keeping the world from rusting shut." His eyes flicked past her to the camera crew again. "So you point a lens at it and call it noble?" "No," she said, stepping closer. "I let people see what's real, that's all. And you, this place, you're more real than anything I've filmed in a long time." He looked at her then, hard, searching for the catch, the angle, the lie she might not even realize she was telling herself. "This is my life," he said quietly. "Not a segment, not a story arc." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it's worth telling." And maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe it was the way she didn't flinch. But something in him shifted, just barely. Enough to let the moment stand, enough to let her stay. He stood just inside the garage, the light from the open bay door cutting a hard line across the floor. Outside, the film crew moved like ants, efficient, tireless, talking in clipped jargon he didn't care to learn. Someone was already taking B-roll of his rusted sign. Someone else was angling a mic boom toward the doorway. Ben watched them with his jaw tight and his shoulders coiled like tension was the only thing holding him upright. "No," he said. Hallie paused, blinking, like she hadn't heard him right. "I'm not doing it," he added. "Not the interviews, not the close-ups, not the slow pans over my goddamn toolbox. You want a story? Go find one that wants to be told." She stepped toward him, careful. "Ben." "You think I'm some relic you can polish up with soft lighting and call the heart of America? That what this is?" "No," she said, firmer now. "That's not what I'm doing." "You sure?" he asked, eyes locking with hers. Because it feels like you came back with a headline already written. The words hit. She flinched, barely, but it was there. I came back, she said slower now, because what you did yesterday, it stayed with me. You didn't ask for thanks. You didn't ask for anything. That kind of integrity, it's rare. He shook his head. No, it's just quiet. And people like you don't know what to do with quiet unless it fits inside a frame. That stopped her. The wind shifted outside, rattling the edge of a tarp. A crew member looked up but kept rolling. She exhaled. All right. You don't want it? I'll pull the plug. No cameras, no footage. We'll move on to the next town. Good, he said, turning back to his workbench. But I'm staying, she added. For a couple of days. I want to see it for myself, even if I don't film a second of it. Because there's something here, Ben, and whether or not you want it captured doesn't mean it's not worth seeing. He didn't look at her again, just picked up a wrench, adjusted a carburetor like the conversation hadn't happened. But his hands weren't steady. And that silence he'd always counted on to keep people out? It suddenly didn't feel so comfortable. She didn't push again, not directly, not in the way Ben had braced for. There were no more pitches, no more lights in his face, no follow-up interviews slipped into conversation. She just stayed. The crew scattered the next day, heading to a nearby town for a farmer's market segment. Hallie stayed behind with nothing but a handheld camera and a notebook she barely wrote in. She wandered the streets at dawn, caught golden light spilling off the awnings of the diner, the crooked shadow of the water tower stretching over Maine. She filmed old signs peeling, kids on bikes chasing each other down cracked sidewalks, a couple sitting in silence on a porch like they'd been doing that same thing every morning for 30 years. And when she ran out of town to film, she started filming his garage. Not in his face. Never that. But she showed up every day, sometimes just across the street, sitting on the curb with a coffee, sometimes inside, tucked near the wall with the dog-eared copy of Popular Mechanics she pretended to read but never turned the pages of. She never filmed when he was looking, but he knew. He could feel the weight of her eyes like heat on his back, the way her gaze lingered when he wiped oil from his hands or leaned under the hood of a truck with one arm braced against the frame. She was collecting moments, not shots, quiet ones, the kind that didn't perform, and somehow that made it worse. He caught her once, just a flash of lens aimed toward his boots as he replaced a brake line, her finger hesitant on the shutter. Their eyes met. She didn't hide it, just lowered the camera and said, soft and unapologetic, "You move like you're fixing more than just cars." He didn't answer, didn't even blink. Just turned back to the truck and kept working. That night, she left a small stack of Polaroids on his counter, unlabeled, unexplained. The garage door at sunset, a spark leaping off the welder's arc. A boy with a flat tire watching Ben's hands with rapt attention. He left them there, didn't throw them away, didn't keep them either. But the next morning when she walked in, he didn't ask her to leave, and she didn't stop watching. It started small, the way all things do in towns like theirs. A pause in conversation when Hallie walked into the diner. A glance held a second too long as she passed the hardware store. Then the whispers followed, quiet at first, as if testing the weight of her name. "That the one filming everything?" someone muttered behind the bakery counter, low but not low enough. "Ben's letting her hang around his shop every day," came the reply. The implication hung heavier than the sentence itself. By the end of the week, it had shifted. Not just curiosity, speculation, assumptions, stories written between the lines of truth. Someone swore she was from L.A., here to make a name off small-town grit. Someone else claimed they saw her filming the cemetery at dusk, said it was for a tragedy angle. Ben heard pieces of it everywhere he went, the grocery, the gas station, even the feed store, where silence used to be the default. Now it was questions wrapped in concern. "You sure she's not using you for some Netflix thing?" Cal asked as he filled Ben's tank, wiping his hands on a rag that hadn't seen soap in years. These city types, they spin a story out of nothing. Ben didn't answer, just watched the numbers climb on the pump and kept his jaw locked. But it was different inside the garage. The quiet there hadn't turned mean yet. Hallie still showed up, never with the crew, not anymore. Just her and that damn camera slung around her shoulder like it had earned a place. She didn't ask to film him again, but sometimes she caught moments he hadn't meant to give. The way he crouched to hand a wrench to a kid too shy to speak. The way he stared at the old service calendar like it might remember things for him. One afternoon, while he was under the hood of a Dodge that hadn't run right in 5 years, a voice floated through the open door. "Ben Wilder's finally got himself a city girl." Laughter followed. Mean, harmless, it didn't matter. Hallie stood at the back of the garage, still the lens pointed at the floor. Ben didn't say a word. But the next time someone wandered in with more curiosity than respect, he wiped his hands clean, stepped into the sunlight, and said, flat and clear, "She's got a right to be here." And just like that, the garage door stayed open, but the lines were drawn. She waited until the end of the day, after the last customer had driven off and the light in the garage turned the color of old copper. Ben was still under the hood of a truck that didn't want to be saved, sweat bleeding through the back of his shirt, the collar smudged with oil. She stood by the workbench, hands in her pockets, watching like she always did, quiet, careful, patient. "I was thinking," she started, voice low but steady, "you might want a break from carburetors and cracked gaskets." He didn't look up, just reached for the socket wrench without needing to see where it was. "You thinking of teaching me to meditate or something?" She smiled but didn't push. "Dinner, tonight. My place. I found a grocery store that doesn't smell like mothballs, and I bought too much chicken. It's not a date. It's just, thank you." That made him stop just for a second. The wrench stilled in his hand. He didn't say anything, just kept working like the words hadn't landed. She didn't wait for an answer, just nodded once and said, 6 o'clock, before walking out, the bell over the garage door giving a single tired ring behind her. 6 came and went. The clock over his workbench ticked past with indifference. He scrubbed his hands at the sink, the water turning brown, then pink, then clear, dried them on a rag that had seen better years, stared at his own reflection in the small, cracked mirror above the soap. He didn't change his shirt, just threw on a clean jacket and grabbed the keys from the hook by the door. The truck coughed once before turning over, headlights cutting into the dusk like second thoughts. When he pulled into the gravel drive beside the little rental she'd been staying in, the porch light was already on, warm, steady. There was music playing inside, soft, something with piano and strings. He knocked once. She opened the door without surprise, like she knew he'd come even when he didn't. "Told you it wasn't a date," she said, stepping aside. He walked in anyway, didn't speak, didn't need to. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't ask for permission. The house was small, rented, the kind of place where every piece of furniture looked like it had a backstory, none of them hers. A battered couch pushed up against the window, a chipped table with mismatched chairs. On the counter, a pot of chili simmered low, filling the air with something that felt like memory. Ben sat stiff in one of the chairs, hands wrapped around a heavy ceramic mug he hadn't asked for. She'd poured him sweet tea like it was second nature, then ladled 2 bowls with practiced efficiency, the kind of task you do when you don't want to give yourself too much time to think. A record played softly in the corner, crackling guitar, old vocals that sounded like they'd been through something. He didn't ask who, she didn't offer. The chili was good. He told her so, and she gave a half smile, like compliments made her nervous. They didn't talk at first, just ate, slow, the clink of spoon against ceramic filling the silence. Then finally she asked the question people usually danced around. "You ever think this is where you were meant to end up?" He looked at her, one brow raised. "Fixing busted engines in a town no one can find on a map?" She shrugged. Could have been worse. He leaned back, eyes drifting to the window. "Used to think I'd leave. Me and my brother were going to head west, Buy a shop in Arizona. Hotter work, fewer winters. Didn't happen. What stopped you? He didn't answer right away, just stared at a spot on the floor like it owed him something. Cancer, he said finally. Took him fast. By the time we had the down payment saved, he was gone, and I stayed. The quiet after that wasn't awkward. It was reverent, like they'd both stepped over some line they couldn't come back from. My sister, she said, voice softer now. Drunk driver. She was 24. I spent a year after that pretending I could outrun it. New city, new jobs, new everything. Did it work? He asked. She met his eyes, and for once there was no camera, no distance, just her. No, she said, but it brought me here. They sat like that for a long while, 2 bowls scraped clean, 2 lives that didn't go the way they were supposed to, and a song playing that neither of them could name, but neither of them stopped. It wasn't meant to be anything. Just a quiet afternoon, sun caught in the dust, Ben kneeling next to a beat-up bike with a crooked chain, and a boy too shy to ask for help until Hallie nudged him forward. Ben hadn't hesitated, just glanced at the bike, then at the kid and said, "All right, let's take a look." She'd filmed it with her phone, not the real camera, no tripod, no mic, no prep, just instinct. The way his hands moved with ease, the way he crouched to eye level with the boy, like it wasn't about the bike at all, like it was about giving the kid a reason to believe in something fixable. He didn't ask for a name, didn't offer praise when the boy managed to realign the chain with his small, shaking fingers. He just nodded once and said, "There you go. You did that." That night, she sat at the little kitchen table with her laptop open, and the audio barely loud enough to hear. She trimmed the beginning, removed herself from the frame, let it speak with no narration, no edit, no title beyond what she typed into the post. Some people don't need attention to make a difference. They just show up. She posted it and closed the laptop, didn't even check it before bed. By morning, it had 100,000 views. By noon, it had 1 million. Her inbox filled with requests, networks, magazines, producers wanting to amplify the story. Strangers wrote essays in the comments about how the world needed more men like that, more small acts of kindness, more quiet strength. They didn't know his name, just called him the man in the garage or the one with the calm hands. She watched the clip again around dusk, her coffee gone cold, phone buzzing off the table. It still made her breath catch, not because of the views, but because that moment, simple, honest, was exactly what she'd seen the first time he stood on that roadside and asked nothing of her. She hadn't told him yet. She wasn't sure how, not because he'd be angry, because he wouldn't understand, because to him that was just a Thursday. But to the rest of the world, it was something they didn't know how much they missed until they saw it. And now they couldn't look away. He found out the way people always do in towns like this, by accident, and too late. Luann at the diner said it first, sliding a laminated menu across the counter like she was handing over a loaded weapon. "Didn't know you were famous now," she said, not quite looking at him. Ben blinked. "What?" She turned her phone around. There he was, kneeling by the kid's bike, hand steady, face bent in concentration. The video played on loop, comments scrolling like wildfire. "This man is what the world needs more of. My heart is in pieces. Where is this town?" Ben stood before the eggs hit the skillet. By the time he shoved through the garage door, Hallie was already there, camera slung low, head buried in a notebook, humming under her breath like everything was still intact. She looked up and smiled. That's what gutted him, that she smiled like nothing had cracked open. "Turn it off," he said. The words hit the room like a fist. She frowned, confused. "What?" "The video, the post, whatever the hell you call it. Take it down." Her face fell, slow, like the weight of his voice had finally registered. "Ben?" "You filmed me," he snapped. "You filmed that kid. You posted it without asking. You didn't even warn me." "I didn't know it would take off like that," she said, too fast. It wasn't about exposure, it was about truth. That moment meant something. You meant something." "I'm not your story," he growled, stepping closer. "You think because you caught me on a kind day, that gives you the right to cut it up and feed it to strangers for views?" "No," she said, quieter now. I thought people needed to see what quiet good looked like." He looked at her then, not like before, not the way he had at the dinner table or across the porch swing. This look was colder, hardened. "You don't get to decide that for me." She swallowed, jaw clenched. "I was trying to help." "Well, you didn't," he said. "You broke something." She stood still, breathing hard. He turned his back. "I think you should go," he added. "Take your cameras, take your crew, and leave my life the way you found it." He didn't watch her walk out. Didn't need to. The door shut quieter than he expected, which made it worse. Silence always did. The garage was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. No distant hum of her voice drifting in from the porch. No camera bag by the door, no half-drunk coffee cup left absent-mindedly near the workbench. Just the echo of his own footsteps and the low groan of old hinges when he opened the office. That's where he found the note, folded clean in half, no envelope, no dramatic flourish, just plain white paper sitting on the counter next to the register like it had been left there by accident. But it hadn't. He knew that the second he saw the curve of her handwriting, the way the ink pressed a little heavier on certain words like they'd cost her something. "You're more than what you fix." That was it. No name, no goodbye, just those 7 words. Ben stared at it longer than he wanted to. Didn't touch it, didn't crumple it, or fold it again, or slip it into his pocket. He just stood there with the ghost of her voice in his head, and the weight of something he hadn't asked for sitting heavy on the counter. Outside, the wind picked up, pushing dry leaves across the lot. Her car was gone. No tire marks, no sign of departure, just absence, the kind that didn't leave a trace but left you hollow. He walked the length of the shop twice, checked the porch, the lot, even the tree where she used to lean when she thought he wasn't paying attention. But she wasn't there, not in the shadows, not in the light. Later, he sat at the workbench and tried to go through the motions, spark plugs, brake pads, routine maintenance that used to feel like something steady. His hands moved, but his chest felt like it had caved in a little. It wasn't just about the video. It wasn't just about the breach. It was that she'd seen him, really seen him, and he'd pushed that away. And now she was gone. No fanfare, no confrontation, just a folded note and a silence too sharp to ignore. The mornings were the same. Alarm at 5. Coffee by 5:15, black, no sugar. The radio stayed off. He didn't want voices, not even the old country station that used to hum through the garage like background breath. He opened the bay doors before the sun had fully risen, just like he always did. Rolled the first car in, old Chevy with a loose belt, and set to work without thinking. Hands moved on autopilot, twist, pull, tighten, the mechanics of muscle memory, but the rhythm felt off, like a song played half a beat too slow. He used to catch her in the reflection of the toolbox, camera slung low, brow furrowed as she scribbled notes between takes. She never got in the way, just watched, listened. Now there was nothing to catch in the chrome but himself. Just a tired man with oil under his nails and a quiet that wasn't peaceful anymore. It was punishing. The town had noticed too, not with words, but with absence. People asked less. Lingering questions at the counter stopped mid-breath when they saw his face. Someone had drawn hearts in the dust on her side of the diner booth. They stayed for 3 days before someone wiped them away. She'd left no trail, not a box, not a bag, just vanished in that way only people carrying real grief could, like smoke curling out of a cracked window. Ben patched tires, changed oil, fixed things. That's what he'd always done. But now, nothing stayed fixed for long. The same cars kept coming back, the same leaks, the same stalls. Like even the engines knew something was missing. He didn't sleep much, woke up with grease on his hands even on days he hadn't worked late. Dreamed of roads with no signs and headlights that disappeared into dust. The note still sat in the drawer, folded, unread since the first morning. He couldn't throw it away, but he couldn't bring himself to unfold it either. Like the weight of those words might crack something in him that had been holding too long. The stillness used to mean peace. Now it just echoed. Ben was under the hood of a '96 F-150, shoulder deep in a stubborn distributor cap, when he heard the voice behind him. "Hey, excuse me?" He straightened slowly, wiped the back of his wrist across his forehead, then turned. The kid couldn't have been more than 16. Skinny, nervous, ball cap pulled low, like it might make him invisible. He hovered just outside the garage, one foot in the gravel like he was ready to bolt if the conversation didn't go well. Ben nodded, slow and cautious. "Something wrong with your truck?" The boy shook his head. "Don't got one yet, just a bike. But I saw the video, the one with the kid and the chain. That was you, right?" Ben's jaw tightened. "Yeah, that was me." The kid scratched the back of his neck, looked down at the concrete. "I thought it was cool. The way you helped him. My dad doesn't really show me stuff like that. I mean, he works out of town most weeks. When he's back, he's tired." Ben didn't say anything, just waited. "So, the boy continued, voice cracking slightly, "do you think maybe you could teach me, how to fix stuff?" Ben studied him for a long beat. The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. In his chest, something shifted, small, reluctant, like a match striking after too many tries. He glanced back at the truck, then at the cluttered bench behind him. Tools half cleaned, a second pair of gloves that hadn't been used in months. "You know how to hold a socket wrench?" Ben asked finally. The kid's face lit up like someone had flipped a switch. "Not really." "Then get over here." The boy stepped into the garage like it was holy ground. Ben handed him the wrench, adjusted his grip. "You start with how things are supposed to work. Only then can you fix what's broken." The kid nodded, holding the tool like it meant something. For the first time in weeks, Ben felt the stillness ease. Not disappear, but shift. It wasn't peace yet, but it was movement, a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The first crack of thunder rolled in low and slow, a growl against the horizon. Most folks didn't think much of it. Storms came and went, usually bark and no bite. But by nightfall the clouds dropped fast, thick and heavy, the kind of gray that swallowed up the edges of the town and made even the diner sign look like it was floating in fog. The rain hit hard, sudden, relentless. Ben was locking up the garage when it started to pour in, earnest. Within minutes the gutters overflowed, the dirt lot turned to muck, and water ran in rivulets across the pavement, searching for every crack and low point. He stood under the overhang, breath fogging in the cooling air, watching the sheets come down sideways. Then the radio crackled to life. He still kept the old CB set in the office, mostly for weather, emergencies, or when the power flickered out and cell towers failed. Now it buzzed with frantic voices. A delivery van stuck out near Miller's Ridge. A creek overflowing behind Maine. Sandbags needed at the pharmacy. Ben didn't think, just grabbed his coat, keys, a rope, and a shovel, slapped a towel on the front seat, and drove out into the mess with his headlights carving twin paths through the waterlogged dark. He reached the van first, half submerged, tilted into the ditch, a young woman behind the wheel and her toddler crying in the back seat. She looked up like he was salvation itself. He waded in, rope around his waist, boots sucking into the mud, hands steady as he pulled open the passenger door and lifted the child first, cradling her close against his chest. No words, just movement. Purpose. By midnight he'd hit every storefront downtown, sandbagged the bakery, braced the grocery door with scrap wood, helped Old Man Tiller haul crates of inventory off the floor and onto shelves. His clothes were soaked through, body aching, fingers raw. Still, he kept going, not for thanks, not for show, just because someone had to. By the time the rain eased to a whisper, his truck was running on fumes and his muscles burned. He sat behind the wheel, drenched and bone-deep tired, watching the town blink back to life. One porch, light at a time. No cameras, no recognition. Just the quiet truth of a man who stayed when the sky turned. They showed up 2 days after the flood. News van idling outside the garage just past noon. Clean tires, camera already prepped. The woman who stepped out wore polished boots and a blazer too crisp for the kind of town where dust never really settled. She smiled like she expected resistance, which meant she already knew who he was. Ben stood near the open bay door, grease on his hands, a wrench in his palm. He didn't move as she approached. "Mr. Wilder?" she asked, tilting her head just enough to seem soft. "Sarah Kelman, Channel 9 out of Santa Fe. We've been hearing about the flood response here. A lot of folks mentioned you." He didn't nod, didn't answer. Just kept his eyes on the engine block in front of him. "We're running a segment," she continued, unbothered by the silence. "Local heroes, small-town resilience, that kind of thing. Just a few questions." "No," he said. The word was flat, clean, final. She hesitated, then shifted. "I understand, but people are saying—" "I didn't do it for people to say anything," he interrupted, finally looking up. Her face didn't fall, but her smile thinned. He turned back to the truck. The moment was over. She lingered. He felt her waiting. "I used to watch your segment," he said suddenly, surprising even himself. "Years back. You covered the fires up north. Didn't look away when everything was burning." Sarah blinked, thrown off balance. "That was a long time ago." "Yeah, and you were honest." She didn't answer, just waited. Ben exhaled, slow and steady, wiped his hands on a rag and tossed it aside. "Maybe just this once," he said, "but no spotlight, no dramatics. You want to talk about what happened, we talk about the town, not me." She nodded, and for the first time, the smile wasn't practiced. It was real, quiet, respectful. He led her to the side of the garage, where the sun cut through the dust in long, golden slats. No lights, no script, just 2 chairs, a slow breeze, and the kind of truth that didn't need dressing up. The camera blinked on, and Ben told the story, not as the man who saved a town, but as one who stayed when others left, who got up when it was easier to go home. The video popped up on her feed at midnight. She was in a rented apartment in Austin, unpacking gear she hadn't touched in days, scrolling aimlessly, numb, restless. The news anchor's face was familiar enough, her voice too polished to stir anything real, but then came the headline, "Local Mechanic Leads Flood Rescue Effort in Carson Valley." She stilled, watched the thumbnail buffer, watched it again. When it finally played, her throat tightened before a word was even spoken. There he was, Ben, sitting in a folding chair beside the open bay door, wearing the same oil-streaked shirt she remembered, hair still too long at the neck. He looked uncomfortable, like he was holding back from bolting, but he stayed. "No one asked," he said, voice low and even. "Water was rising, people needed help. That's just what you do." The camera didn't push in, no dramatic cutaways, just him, in profile, against the dusty light, honest. She sat back in the chair, heartbeat spiking as the screen flickered. He mentioned the diner, the kid from the bike, the others who helped, neighbors, shopkeepers, teenagers with buckets, but he never said I, not once. He made it about the town. She watched it twice. The first time because she needed to see his face again. The second because she needed to be sure it was still the man she remembered. It was. But something in him had changed, or maybe something had finally come forward. She closed the laptop gently, sat in the quiet for a long moment, then stood with purpose that felt foreign after so many days of drifting. No emails, no camera crew, no call to the producer she owed a final cut. She booked the flight herself, middle seat, one stopover, nothing glamorous. She didn't care. This wasn't about the documentary anymore. It hadn't been for a while. She packed light, just a duffel and the soft flannel she used to sleep in when editing. Late in his kitchen. The plane left at sunrise. She didn't sleep. Just stared out the window and let the weight of the decision settle into her ribs. She wasn't going back to film him. She was going back to see if it wasn't too late to say what she hadn't had the courage to say before she left. The garage was half-shadowed, the midday sun catching only the edge of the bay. Dust swirled in slow circles through the heat, and somewhere inside, a radio hummed low, an old country ballad warbling through static, barely audible over the clink of tools. Ben lay under a Buick, one arm stretched out, socket wrench gripped firm. Grease streaked across his forearm, sweat dampening the back of his collar. He didn't hear the door open, didn't hear footsteps, just felt it, the shift in the air, the way the silence changed its shape around someone new. She didn't speak. She stood just inside the threshold, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, unsure what to say now that she was finally there. No camera, no clipboard, just her, and the mess of all the things she hadn't said. Ben's voice came out from beneath the car, dry even. "I thought I scared you off." She smiled before she meant to. "You did." There was a pause, then the wrench clattered once against the concrete. He slid out slowly, back flat on the dolly, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked up at her. Same eyes, same flannel, different woman. She stepped forward, setting the bag down gently by the workbench. "Saw your interview," she said. He nodded, didn't gloat, didn't shift. "You hated every second of it," she added. That brought the corner of his mouth up. Still better than being filmed fixing a bike without knowing it. Fair. Another pause. The air between them wasn't tense, not anymore, just full, like something waiting to exhale. "I didn't come to film anything," she said softer now. "I just came." He studied her, not for judgment, just to see if she meant it. She did. "Chili still your specialty?" he asked after a beat. "I've upgraded. There's cornbread now?" He nodded. "Could use a break around 6. "I'll be here." Ben picked up the wrench again, turned back to the engine. "All right then." She didn't press further, just pulled up an overturned crate and sat, watching, waiting, being. Sometimes return doesn't need an apology. Sometimes it just needs to happen. The sun had slipped behind the ridge by the time they made it to the porch behind the garage. It was quieter back there, no traffic, no customers, just the sound of wind moving through the trees and the tired creak of the old swing as it swayed gently with no one in it. Ben sat on the top step, one boot planted in the dirt, the other resting just inside the shadow of the railing. Hallie handed him a chipped mug of coffee, then lowered herself down beside him. Close, but not close enough to touch. She didn't expect forgiveness, not tonight. Maybe not ever. They sipped in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. "I used to think stories were about perspective," she said finally, eyes fixed on the horizon. "That if you just told it from the right angle, everything would make sense." He didn't respond, just drank. "But now I think some stories, they don't care how you frame them. They just are, messy, unfinished, not asking to be seen." Ben let the words settle before he spoke. "And yet, people still try to make them clean." She looked at him. "I tried to make you into something for the world, thought I was honoring you. But I didn't ask if you wanted to be honored. That was the problem." His gaze stayed steady on the fading light. "You didn't see the whole picture." "I saw what I wanted," she admitted, "because it felt easier than facing what I'd ruined." A bird called somewhere in the trees. The porch wood creaked beneath their weight. "I was angry," he said, "not because you shared it, but because I didn't know how to trust someone who saw me without asking first." Her voice barely carried. "Do you still feel that way?" He looked at her then, really looked, eyes tired, but not hard. Number not anymore. A beat passed. Long. Quiet. She let out a shaky breath. "Do you believe in second chances?" He nodded once. "Only when they come with the truth." Hallie reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the folded note she'd left behind. Handed it to him. "I kept a copy," she said, "because I wasn't done saying it." He opened it, read it again, slower this time. You're more than what you fix. And this time, he believed it. The sky was overcast the next morning, the kind of gray that settled in quietly, without threat, just wait. Ben was at the workbench tightening a valve spring when he heard her footsteps behind him, steady, unhurried. She didn't call his name, didn't make a scene. Just stopped near the tool chest and waited for him to finish the turn. When he finally looked up, she was holding something out to him, small, silver, familiar. A flash drive. He wiped his hands on a rag before taking it. Didn't ask what was on it, didn't have to. It's the real story, she said, voice level, but laced with something heavier. No edits, no cuts, no music swelling at the right moment. He turned it over in his fingers, eyes narrowing just slightly. Why give it to me? Because it was never mine to keep. The silence between them crackled like static, loaded, uncertain. It's not polished, she added. There's a lot of quiet, long pauses, you fixin' things, kids watching you like you're a magician, locals calling you by name, and that flood night. You never looked at the camera once. Ben stared at the flash drive for a long moment, like it might burn through his skin. I almost didn't come back, she said, because I thought you'd never want to see any of it again. But then I realized this isn't about whether or not the world sees it. It's about you knowing what's there. He didn't look at her when he spoke. And what if I erase it? Her voice didn't waver. Then it disappears, like nothing ever happened. His jaw worked, not angry, just thinking. The weight of something unsaid pushing at the edge of his ribs. She took a step back. Whatever you do with it, it's yours now. She turned, started to walk away. Ben looked at the flash drive one more time, then slipped it into his back pocket like it belonged there, like maybe it held something he wasn't quite ready to name, but wasn't ready to lose either. It was well past closing when Ben finally reached for the flash drive. The shop was dark, but for the small desk lamp in the office, casting a narrow cone of light across the cluttered desk. Tools rested silent. The bay door was down. Outside, the wind stirred loose gravel against the siding in soft scrapes, like a reminder that the world kept moving whether you were ready or not. He sat in the chair, turned the laptop toward him, and plugged it in. No ceremony, no breath held. Just a click and a file marked with the date she'd left the first time. He opened it. There was no title sequence, no voiceover, just the low hum of life. His life, as it unfolded, one unguarded second at a time. The first shot was of the shop, morning light spilling through the open bay, dust catching fire in the sun. He was in the corner, tuning an alternator, shoulders hunched, face unreadable. He didn't know he was being filmed. That much was clear. He moved with the kind of ease that comes when no one's watching, steady, deliberate, quiet. Then came the footage of the boy with the bike, the one he barely remembered, beyond the grease and the wobble in the back wheel. The kid's hands shook. His own didn't. He could see it now, the way he crouched, met the boy's eye, didn't rush, didn't scold, just stayed with him, taught, trusted. He kept watching. The flood footage came next. The van, the mother, the girl with the doll clutched to her chest. Him, knee-deep in water, rope in hand, jaw clenched. No words, just action. She hadn't romanticized any of it, hadn't layered it with soundtrack or pulled quotes. It was raw, real, just him, but different. He barely recognized the man in the footage, not because he looked unfamiliar, but because he looked like someone with purpose, with weight, with presence. Not just a man fixing things, a man holding things together. He leaned back in the chair, the screen fading to black. No credits, no pitch, just a reflection. Ben closed the laptop slowly, gently, sat there in the dark, heart loud in the stillness. He didn't know that man fully, but he wanted to. The first morning, only 2 kids showed up. One was the boy with the crooked bike chain from the video, hat still too big for his head, eyes full of quiet hope. The other was a girl named Lexi, who didn't say much, just clutched a rusted-out carburetor like it owed her something. Ben handed them gloves without fanfare, pointed to the workbench, and said, "We start with what you've got. No sign, no grand announcement, just a handwritten note in the window that read, 'Workshop Saturdays. Bring what's broken.' By the third week, there were 5 kids. By the 5th, there were 12. They came with busted skateboards, engines their uncles gave up on, wheels that no longer turned, and questions. So many questions. Ben answered them all, slowly, patiently, never once raising his voice, never once making them feel like they should have known better. He didn't lecture, he showed. Let them figure it out with their own hands. He only stepped in when something was about to break or explode. Sometimes he let it break anyway. Lessons stick better that way. Hallie kept her distance at first, just stood by the door with a small camera, lens pointed low, waiting for the nod. He gave it eventually, not a word, just a glance and a slow tilt of his chin. She never filmed faces without permission, never turned sound on unless it mattered. She captured hands, tightening bolts, the moment a headlight flickered back to life, the way the kids laughed when grease smeared across someone's nose. It was quiet work, honest. No angles, no narrative arcs, just documentation of something real being built from scratch. One Saturday, as the last of the kids rolled out on a freshly repaired scooter, Lexi turned back and asked, "Why do you do this for free?" Ben looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because someone should have done it for me." She nodded like she understood. When the shop emptied, Hallie stood beside him, watching the dust settle. "You're changing things?" she said. He didn't answer, just picked up a wrench and set it back where it belonged. Some things didn't need words. They just needed doing. The footage began like memory, soft, grainy, steady. No music, just the whir of an old fan somewhere in the background and the slow tick of time passing inside a space that never tried to be anything but what it was. A truck door creaked open. Kids laughed faintly off camera. Tools clinked against metal, the kind of sounds that usually get cut in editing. Hallie kept them in. Her voice came in low, sure, not polished like a studio read, real, like it had been spoken late at night with a blanket around her shoulders and too many thoughts in her chest to sleep. "Some stories don't need drama," she said. "They don't need slow-motion rescues or swelling strings. They don't need a hero's arc or a tragic backstory. Some stories just need someone willing to stop when the rest of the world keeps driving." On screen, Ben leaned over the hood of a pickup, guiding a teenage boy's hands on the wrench, correcting gently when his grip slipped. He didn't look up, didn't know he was being watched. Ben Wilder never asked to be the center of anything. He didn't chase recognition. He barely tolerated attention. But if you ask this town who held it together when the water rose, when the power flickered, when the tires blew out and no one else came, he's the name you'll hear. The screen cut to black and white footage, his hands covered in grease, the garage at sunrise, the old diner sign flickering, a girl tightening the bolts on a bike tire with her tongue stuck between her teeth in concentration. "He won't tell you what he's done, but I will." Back to color now. The porch behind the shop, Ben sitting beside her, watching the sun dip low behind the ridge. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, that just is. Not all stories end in applause. Some end in rust and sweat and small hands learning how to turn a bolt. Some end in silence, or maybe they begin there. Then quiet. Just the low hum of a running engine and the soft echo of a voice that finally told the truth, not to change anything, but to show it was always there. The theater smelled like old wood and popcorn that had burned a little too long in the machine. Rows of faded red seats filled fast, locals in denim jackets and work boots, Sunday dresses and ball caps, brushing knees and sharing quiet glances like no one knew exactly what they were about to watch. There was no red carpet, no press, just a sign taped to the front door that read, Tonight only. Stillness, a story from Carson Valley. Ben stood in the back, leaning against the wall near the fire exit, hands in his pockets, shoulders square. He hadn't shaved, hadn't changed out of the same jacket he always wore when it got cold. Hallie stood across the room, near the projector booth, pretending not to watch him, but watching anyway. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. No dramatic opening, just the town waking up, sunlight on cracked sidewalks, the diner's door swinging open, a bell that rang offbeat and soft. Then the shop, the familiar hum of the garage, a kid wiping his hands on a towel, a girl laughing as she dropped a wrench. Ben in profile, quiet and steady as he leaned in to guide them both. The room was still, not tense, just reverent, like church, like something fragile might break if anyone moved too fast. When his voice came through, layered over the scene of the flood, the water rising, the sandbags, the quiet effort of hands helping hands, no one breathed. You don't wait for someone else to fix it. You show up. That's the job. Ben didn't flinch, didn't shift. Just stood there, unmoving, eyes on the screen as if he were watching a stranger, someone he almost recognized. The credits rolled, no applause. Just a moment of hush, so thick it almost hurt. Then someone clapped, software once, then another. And then the room was full of it. Not loud, not wild, just honest, steady, the kind of applause that says thank you, not look at me. Ben didn't smile, didn't cry. He just nodded once and exhaled, like something that had been sitting inside him for a long time finally had somewhere to go. The streetlight buzzed overhead, casting a pale amber circle onto the sidewalk outside the theater. The crowd had thinned, neighbors drifting back to their cars, kids tugging at tired parents, quiet laughter trailing off into the cool night. No one said much. They didn't need to. The film had done the talking. Ben stood a few paces from the door, hands still in his jacket pockets, shoulders curled slightly inward, like he wasn't used to being looked at for too long. He'd barely moved since the credits ended, just watched the glow spill from the entrance and fade with every goodbye. Hallie was standing near him now, close enough that her coat brushed his sleeve when the wind shifted. She didn't speak either. Her face was soft, unreadable, and her eyes, God, her eyes, held something deeper than pride, not awe, not sympathy, just knowing. He looked at her finally, just turned, quiet and steady, and let himself really see her. She wasn't polished, she wasn't trying. Her hair was windblown and her shoes were dusted with gravel from the lot. But she was there, still here. He reached out. No hesitation this time, no performance. He just took her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, like they'd always been meant to meet halfway, in the quiet after everything else. Her fingers curled into his without question. She leaned in, not dramatic, not trembling, just leaned, rested her shoulder against his chest, her head near his collar, like the weight between them finally made sense when shared. Her smile was small, honest, eyes full, not with tears, but with something clearer. Gratitude, maybe, relief, recognition. Ben didn't say anything. He didn't have to. There was no need to explain what had already been understood. This wasn't a rescue story. There was no savior, no damsel, no redemption through fire. Just two people who had broken in different ways, who'd stopped pretending, who'd seen each other truly, without the camera, without the noise, and stayed. The light buzzed above them. They stayed until it flickered once. Then they walked home, hand in hand, under the kind of silence that felt earned.